mention where you find that a look at this.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
Welcome back. Here's still Daybreak on Trust TV. And right now we're going to take a look at the front pages of the newspapers and see what's going on. Usually, we're going to start with Daily Trust, and it carries this major headline on the front page. High cost of living takes toll on Nigerians. And it comes with riders. Inflation, food prices rise by over 4% in 7 months. And some experts have actually offered how to arrest the situation. Next, we'll look at rescue worker electrocuted, another dies in Kano building collapse. Details of that on page 6. Customers groan under banks' downtime on e-transactions, and that's on page 19. Civil servants more corrupt than politicians, and that is attributed to the Senate committee. And details of that on page 5. At the bottom of the page there, flood, 15 bodies recovered in Maiduguri River. That is quite unfortunate, and details of that can be found on page 26. Towards the top of the page, below the masthead, PDP crisis, Ayu slams Wike, says, I won't step down as chair. For details of that, on page 24. And how I resolved ASU strike in 1 day, says Jonathan. And I think the present administration should borrow a leaf from that and see how that could actually be achieved. 2023 borrowing plan, FG may drive Nigeria's debt to highest ever. Details of that can be found on page 21. Well, these are the major headlines on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
And moving on to the Daily Sun. Somebody would say you can't do without the sun. Yeah? The major headline there, it's still staying with the political developments in the country. Ayu, Wike trade wars. Those calling for my resignation are kids, says the PDP chair. Nobody can threaten us. This is according to the Rivers State governor. You'll find there also a picture of Governor Nyesom Wike. He has been appearing very trendy the last couple of days with fashion style trailing the governor, who also seem to now have what the musicians have usually on stage, a hype man wherever he speaks. He's standing there with easily to recognize the governor of Abia State among other members of his team. And we have other headlines there. Buhari to autumn. I never ordered security agents not to touch Fulani killers' headman. And this headsman. This is on page 3. Governors, SGF, Kalu, hail Bishop Kuka at 70. You'll find the details of that on page 8. And just beside the name marks, you have resolve ASU strike now. Obi tells FG. How I settle 4-month crisis, Jonathan. Nance accuses lecturers of plots to destroy public varsities. And we have a belt there beneath the nameplate. APC wouldn't get 25% in most states, and this is coming from the PDP. Other headlines on the front pages. Atiku, Tambuwal, PDP challenges Wike's case. Hearing fixed for September 14th. You'll find the details of that on page 6. Energy transition plan. VP departs for US to meet Kamala Harris. World Bank Group, others. You'll find the details of that on page 8. Emirate reinstate flight operation to Lagos. This must be good news. You find the details of that on page 26. Nigeria's oil revenue down to 28%, down 28% to 799 billion in Q1 2022, and this is coming from the Central Bank of Nigeria. And finally, we have INEC warns election observers against late application. You'll find the details of that on page 6. These are the major headlines on the front page of Daily Sun.
This Day newspaper, and it carries this headline on the front page. It carries a special report, actually, and it says, with 177 days to presidential poll, race still too close to call. And this day defines path to victory for Atiku, Tinubu, and Obi. And there's a breakdown of the analysis of those different paths for the different candidates there on the front page of the This Day newspaper. Those calling for my sacking are children. And riders here say why chairman's exit won't solve alleged marginalization as party constitution mandates northern takeover. PDP National Working Committee in marathon meeting over NEC National Caucus. Autumn speaks on relationship with Wike, says he's a good friend. Still talking about headlines on the front page of This Day. On the top of the page there, at Kuka's birthday celebration, Jonathan urges Nigerians to be vigilant to save democracy. And here's a riders here that says, you're selfless, honest, courageous. And that's Northern governors tell Sokoto Bishop. Tinubu Fayemi Tambuwal Dogara celebrate cleric. Okada ban defaulting riders, passengers risk 3 years imprisonment, Lagos warns. Details of that can be found on page 41. Now, these are the major headlines on the front page of This Day newspaper this morning.
Moving on quickly to The Guardian. And in keeping with the Guardian headline is similar to some of those we have read this morning. I won't step down, IU speaks as PDP crisis get messier. Those calling for my resignation are children. Court adjourns Wike's suit against Atiku. PDP to September 14. Obi didn't strike deal with Atiku, says Okukwe. On mockery, Adeaju slammed Tinubu over visit to Jonathan. Tinubu's visit shows no ideological difference on politics, says Farumbi. And you'll find here the picture of Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, the Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, there with the former President Goodluck Jonathan at the event of his 70th birthday and the fundraising for the Kuka Leadership Center. We also have other headlines there on The Guardian. Be vigilant, Nigerians sliding into dictatorship, Jonathan warns. Akeredolu orders knock FG over pipeline protection contracts to individuals. And other stories there. Oshibajo lead energy mission to U.S. meet Kamala Harris, World Bank Group. Report exposes how multinational tobacco companies aid illicit financial flows in Nigeria. Others. You'll find this on page 3. Gafaru, Lagos Street, burdened by erosion. This is on the Metro page of The Guardian, and you'll find that on page 8. And finally, we have APC chieftain raps Wike over recent political activities. You'll find the details of this on page 30. These are the major headlines on the front page of The Guardian.
Next, we take a look at The Nation newspaper. It carries this headline, PDP crisis, IU hits Wike, Autumn, Makinde, Ikpeazu. And they were nowhere when we formed PDP. Riders here to say Rivers governor demands state's stake in party. Mimiko Duke Adoke Ghana accused of fueling crisis. National Working Committee to meet in Benue, Oyo, Enugu, Abia, and Akwa Ibom governors. Now, that's a major headline on the front page of The Nation newspaper. Going down the bottom, towards the bottom of the page, aviation fuel price hike may affect our operations, CAS Amao warns, and seeks import license, depot establishment. 2035 fossil fuels deadline will hurt economy, says the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. At the bottom of the page there, 7 family members die after breakfast and man stabs grandmother to death. And those are some interesting headlines there on the front page of The Nation. Towards the top of the page there, EFCC proving Zamfara governor for alleged money laundering. Details of that can be found on page 4. Akeredolu accuses federal government of bias in Tompolo's pipeline contract. And Buhari governors, Kalu, others greet Kuka at 70. Lagos Okada ban, phase 2 enforcement kicks off. And a look at the economy now. Investors maintain 4.5 trillion naira gains for 8 months. And rider here that says 28.3 billion recorded as net loss in August. Now, these are the major headlines on the front page of The Nation newspaper.
Moving on quickly to the Punch newspaper this morning, still staying with politics. 2023 polls, APC presidential aspirants shun Abuja meeting. APC presidential primary co-contestants should not be ignored, says aspirant. Tinubu Shetima unaware of meeting, says campaign team. Oshibajo jets out to US. And as with other papers, you'll find pictures there of those who went to celebrate with Bishop Kukah. Among them are the APC presidential flag bearer Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu, Bishop Kukah, President Jonathan, and of course the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu. Kukah at 70, Nigeria derailing, need right leaders, says Jonathan. Nigeria's record 1.7 million right violations. Children worse hits. This must be according to a report. EFCC arrests 13 illegal miners, impounds 5 trucks. 32 states failed to attract investment in Q2. You'll find details of this on the Punch newspaper. I won't allow anyone destabilize PDP, and this is according to AYU. $265 million. Emirates make U-turn to resume flights. You find the details of that on page 26. Named terrorism sponsors, oil thief Obi tells FG. And just beside the name marks, we have strike. ASU welcomes government intervention, wants sincerity. You find this on page 18. I'm sure this is a slight breakaway from earlier reports that they are done with the negotiations. These are the major details on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
And with that, we wrap up the look at the front pages of the headlines. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, we'll go deep into the analysis of those headlines that we've just looked at. Do stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve the sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
But in a situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television. And we now have our guest in the studio to look at what the front pages are saying this morning. It's a pleasure to welcome once again this bright Thursday morning the editor-in-chief of sorry, I have a latest update line. I beg your pardon. Madam Nasrallah, I have too many things running through my head already this morning. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
The headlines this morning seem to be touching on several issues based on the developments in the last 24 hours, but the Daily Trust has chosen to highlight the increasing cost of living in Nigeria, occasioned by a number of things. Cost of grains, cost of transportation, the diesel, the difficulty for businesses securing diesel at a competitive price to keep businesses alive, the insecurity that has stopped farmers from going to the farm, thereby hampering production. And now, even worse so, the floods, the little we have been able to produce seem to be swept completely off by the flood. What do you make of this headline this morning?
Well, I think it's a very important story because when you talk about cost of living, you're actually talking about your ability to make enough money, you know, in a way that it will be able to fund your lifestyle. That's taking your kids to school, having the food to eat, you know, being able to transport yourself from one point to another, and things like that. But the fact is, it has not been easy, and you can actually see what is happening. And some of it I will blame government policies, you know, even though so many are saying it's a global thing and what have you. But the fact is, if those in charge of, you know, running the country are putting the needed policies in place, certainly we'll be able to cushion the effect of all the things that are happening around the globe. I remember the president even trying to make, you know, an analogy to say Nigeria is not having it difficult the way its neighbors you know, also have it. But like people will say, if I don't feel it, I may not be able to talk about it. What we are actually facing as Nigerians is the only thing we can talk about. Right now, it's very difficult for people to move from one point to another, to have what to eat, you know, to be able to even afford to pay rent, to take their kids to school, so many things. And you wonder where the government is. People are gradually turning into, you know, government in themselves, in the sense that you have to make provision for your own security. You have to make provision for so many amenities, things that you shouldn't even worry about. But here we are. So I think this is a very important story that is talking about the reality that we face as Nigerians.
Just before I allow Ibrahim come in, we have seen, it does appear, like you have rightly pointed out, that the attacks seem to be coming from every facet. I mean, the schools are about to resume. Parents are already, their hearts are already pumping, you know, because of the likelihood of an increase. In fact, some have been communicated that there would definitely be increase in prices. But is it that the government doesn't understand this thing? Because some of these statistics on the worsening living conditions also come from government agencies. Is it an indication that they doubt the statistics that is even coming from an agency of government itself, or is a blatant disregard for the implications of those statistics?
I think that's not even what we should worry about. What actually we should be worrying about is the fact that nobody is even talking about those that are not employed. Right now we're talking about maybe those that are underemployed, you know, or maybe not being able to meet up with certain challenges. Sometimes you will see people talking about the fact that we are like having a middle class, but which middle class are we talking about when most of us are actually one major sickness away from poverty? You know, you will think you are making enough money to be able to take care of so many things, and then once you are faced with a major sickness, before you know it, you are back to zero. You know, you have to start all over again. So, like you said, when government agencies are coming up with things like this, you will expect that, okay, the government has, like, you know, right before it, you know, the reality on the ground. So it's for the government to be able to act on these indices that we are seeing, we are seeing, and things like that. So if you ask me, I will say the government should actually worry about those that have no income at all. You know, people that, you know, we have largely agrarian communities. Now people are not able to go to the farms because of insecurity. So how are these people actually faring? Because government should worry. Because when you don't have a legal means of income, then also you begin to think of all sorts of things, taken into crime. You know, just recently the papers were washed with stories of moles, you know, people acting as informants to criminals and things have you. If they have legal means of livelihood, probably they may not want to side with things like that. So that's why the government actually should worry.
Well, talking about what the government is doing or has done, in Nigeria we are quite fortunate not to have a lot of a myriad of natural disasters. We don't have earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and typhoons, cyclones or whatnot. But our main issue is flooding, which we have seen from the beginning of this rainy season. Lots of communities have been submerged, so to speak. And we don't seem to, and it's a perennial problem because it's not just happening now, it has been happening for years now, and we don't seem to have come to grips with what to do with it. It's always about, someone said in Nigeria it's about search and recover and not search and rescue anymore. You understand? Because that's what we're just reacting to it. We're waiting for the floods to happen and then we try to take some action. Isn't there any way we can be proactive in actually forestalling these things? Because we know it will happen eventually.
Yeah. I think what we should even be paying attention to is what it costs to actually recover. As you say, you know, if you put certain things in place, probably you may not have to be coming with relief items, you know, and what have you. Our major problem is the fact that you see our societies are expanding, you know, communities are new communities are coming up every day. But the problem is these communities are actually going there before the government. You know, you see people building along water, you know, channels and lowlands and what have you. And then the government will like be forced to react. React in the sense that people have already built their houses, you know, and probably there is nothing you can do. You may not be able to just tell them to leave, because where do you expect them to go? They have like put in their resources. But if you go to serious places, even before the expansion, the government must have done its, you know, preliminary actions and what have you. There are maybe sanitation, channels, things like that. But in our case, that's not the case. We are always trying to react from one action to another, which is actually very bad.
Still staying with the issue of flood, but slightly away to another form of disaster. We saw the building collapse in Kano. Matter of fact, it even got the attention of the international community. We also saw how firsthand, even with the search and rescue, we are not exactly very proactive. You see agencies, search and rescue agencies coming in and not looking any different from even the onlookers, whether it is in their kitting or with the equipment that you need to adequately deliver this rescue. I mean, the Daily Trust is reporting that rescue workers were even electrocuted in the process, which means there are procedural issues even with the way we conduct rescue. I mean, I'm sure you have followed the Kano incident. What does it bring back to mind when it comes to search and rescue in Nigeria?
We still have a lot to actually learn, because I saw some of the affected people actually saying the rescuers actually went on break. How do you do that in the middle of
operation?
You know, how do you do that? Maybe you should have worked in shifts, because maybe somebody may need just some few seconds to give up. And if you don't reach him in good time, then we may end up losing him, which is very bad. And one thing I would want to say here is the fact that unless we make our local governments, you know, efficient and effective, honestly, we will continue to talk about things like this, because disaster management should begin at the level of the local governments, you know, because they are closer to the people, and once they have the capacity, they should be able to start at least before, you know, major help will now come to the people. But in this case, the local governments have been reduced to maybe just paying salaries. Even that one, you know, they can't do it as at when due. They have to rely on state governors who have taken over everything, but not also doing the responsibilities. If they are taking over the responsibilities, you know, doing what the local governments are supposed to do, then maybe you will have said, probably it's okay, but the problem is they are not doing anything about the responsibilities of the local government, but they have taken over their resources. And
one critical part to this report would also be the post-rescue attention. With trauma management in Nigeria is close to nothing. If you manage to get some people alive and you take them to the hospital, you just abandon them to their family, not minding the kind of shock they would have gone through and the kind of counseling that they will require to properly heal. Do we ever learn from this crisis, or we are just in a hurry to leave this one and wait for when the next one happens? What can we do differently?
It's unfortunate that the government agencies sometimes they think as if they are doing favors to the people. Because without the people, where will you be? You know, you are there to serve the people. So you should try and be able to do that effectively. And we have been we are being faced with disaster, situations, over and over again. This is not the first time it is happening, and I know this is not going to be the last.
True.
So what do we do to make sure that anytime it happens, we are able to at least handle things, better, not just trying to always trying to react when things have gone haywire, and then in the end, we will not be able to do what we are supposed to do.
Well, we do hope things change for the better for most of us. We'll be remiss if we actually don't touch on this story that seems to be going around all the newspapers, the PDP crisis or non-crisis, depending on who you talk to. It seems to be taking different dimensions every day. River State Governor fires a salvo. You find the vice presidential candidate of the PDP firing his own salvos, and now we're hearing from the party chairman. What do you make of the whole scenario?
It's like they are still a long way from the reconciliation that they are talking about. For a national chairman, of a major political party to be talking about his opponents, as children, because the last I know, children don't vote in elections. And here we are talking about, state governors, we are talking about former ministers, people that are like heavyweight in their own right. But that shows you that we are still a long way from the reconciliation that they are talking about. Instead of like so many people will even say, those who made pencils, didn't forget to do erasers. So possibly now that he's talking in this way, for them to be able to reconcile things, he may have to go back on some of the things that he is saying. And the same thing with his opponents. You need to have like a united front to be able to prosecute the 2023 elections. If you go there as a divided house, then you should only blame yourself whatever comes your way. But I expect other elders of the party to actually intervene. Let them be circumspect, not talking, saying all the things that they feel like saying in the media, because the media thrives on that. They are looking for stories, and the more controversy you have, the better, because people like reading about all these major players. Whatever they do is news. So the journalists will continue to look for things like this, and it's left to them to decide whether that's exactly what they want to be showing about themselves.
I would still like you to touch on 2 days ago the government made public its plan to borrow for the next budget, which we have become accustomed to apparently. But what was surprising is that this time we will be doubling whatever we had done, prior to this time, which is likely to shoot our debt figures to the region of 50 trillion, the highest ever we have attained, even pre the debt forgiveness in 2004. And every time you speak to analysts, they keep telling you that borrowings have options. I mean, there are different ways to attain these things. PPPs are options and all of that. Why is it that we seem to have developed a penchant for easy money? We would rather go and borrow the hot cash, and we find it difficult to then account for it rather than target these borrowings to projects where people can fund and recover them. Why is it difficult to look at alternatives to borrowing in this country?
Because, like you said, it has become the easiest way out. You know, maybe you just go borrow and then allow whoever takes, you know, over from you to worry about things like that. But because we are not a serious country, we are not even talking about reducing the cost of governance. We keep talking, mouthing it, but we don't act on it. Our officials are still moving about with, you know, long motorcade, you know, people that you don't even need. What stops you from moving about with just two vehicles? Maybe one and then another spare, so that when one breaks down, you continue with the other. But no, you see so many people that are not doing anything, you know, guzzling for so many things, and then you keep borrowing. So instead of all this money that you are borrowing to go into productive ventures, you end up funding the lifestyle of our politicians. I saw a story even saying that a Senate committee, you know,
civil servants was the
civil servants will say the same thing about politicians, because it's the politicians that are, the politicians are actually the ones that, you know, determine some of the things that happen at all this civil. So where are we going? That's what we should be talking about.
Well, that is a very serious issue to actually look at. But just like Sunday asked, isn't there any other way that we can do something? I mean, we borrow this cash. It's just cash that we're collecting, and we spend it. And we use it for things like you just pointed out now, the cost of governance. We pay salaries, we give allowances and all that. And then we sit down and we wait for the next cycle so that we can borrow again. We're not like bringing in this money, okay, let's put it into a particular venture or something like that that can actually yield something that might be able to use, that we can be able to use to service some of this debt. Isn't there anything that we can do differently?
Well, we can tap into, you know, the resources at the disposal of the private sector, but unfortunately in Nigeria, you can hardly differentiate between the private sector and the public. Yeah, because most of the companies that you see thriving, you know, they're actually being owned by people in government. So if that's not the case, then we should be able to see funds coming, because this is something that you will be able to make money from.
Exactly.
And businessmen are actually in it for the money, not just because they want to help the government, but the problem is we don't even have that scenario. So we are left with, you know, the government borrowing, and then in the end we don't even know where the money is going.
Interesting. In 30 seconds, yesterday, Jonathan was given a recipe of how he solved that food crisis in his time, even though we understand that the issues are still there. But is there anything to learn from the admonition that he gave the government at the Kuka 70th anniversary yesterday?
Yeah, he was actually directing his suggestion to the president, because what he said, you know, despite all the committee meetings and all the panels and what, he had to like intervene directly, and that's like what he's telling the president.
It's time for you to come.
It's time for you to come in. We don't want to keep hearing about the president directing, you know, giving orders. You should actually, you know, be at the center and then be able to solve this once and for all.
Interesting suggestion there. As a way of wrapping this conversation this morning, it's been very insightful comments and analysis from our analysts in the studio. We've been talking to the editor-in-chief of Dateline newspaper. This time my memories did not fail me. Ibrahim Nasrullah, a former colleague, a senior brother, and a professional to the core. It's a pleasure having you today. We wish you the best of what is left of the day.
Thank you for having
This
me.
is where we'll draw the curtain on newspaper analysis this morning. When we return at the top of the hour, the show continues. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a person look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that